The gallery buzzed with quiet elegance, soft footsteps, hushed voices, and priceless art on every wall. Then Ozzy Osbourne suddenly stopped walking. His eyes locked on a woman pushing a cleaning cart down the marble corridor. She wore a faded uniform, her head down, invisible to everyone around her. He didn't move, because he knew her. Not personally, but he knew her. He'd seen her 1,000 times before, in Birmingham, in the council flats where he grew up. The woman scrubbing floors while rich people walked past without a glance. The woman working 2 jobs to keep the lights on. The woman society had labeled the help, and then forgotten. Sharon noticed him staring. "Ozzy?" He didn't answer. He just watched as the woman bent down, wiping a scuff mark off the pristine floor. Her movements were mechanical, practiced. She'd done this 1,000,000 times. Around them, art collectors sipped champagne and debated the profound symbolism of a painting that cost more than this woman would earn in 10 years. They stood 3 feet away from her and never looked down. To them, she was part of the scenery. Furniture with a pulse. But Ozzy saw something different. He saw his mom, his aunts, every woman from his neighborhood who'd cleaned rich people's houses just to survive. Every person who'd been treated as less than because of what they did, not who they were, and something inside him snapped. What happened next wasn't planned. It wasn't a publicity stunt or some calculated moment of celebrity kindness. It was raw, instinctive, and completely human. It was also caught on camera. Within 48 hours, the footage would be everywhere, shared millions of times, debated on talk shows, turned into think pieces about class and dignity and what it means to really see people. But in that moment, Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness, the guy who'd bitten the head off a bat, the rock star worth millions, wasn't thinking about any of that. He was just thinking about his mom, and about this woman who deserved better than being invisible. So he walked over. And what he did next would remind the world why sometimes the most radical thing you can do is treat someone like they matter. It was a private afternoon viewing at a contemporary art gallery in London. Ozzy and Sharon Osbourne had slipped in quietly to avoid attention, the kind of place where silence felt expensive. High ceilings, white walls, track lighting that made every shadow deliberate. The room smelled faintly of polish and fresh paint, that sterile, cultivated cleanliness that screamed money. Collectors murmured near abstract canvases, wine glasses balanced between their fingers. They spoke in that particular tone wealthy people use when discussing art. Reverent, intellectual, slightly bored, fascinating use of negative space. The artist is quite provocative, don't you think? I heard this piece sold for 80,000 before it even hung. They moved slowly from painting to painting, catalogs tucked under their arms, their expressions carefully neutral. This was business disguised as culture, investments disguised as appreciation. And in the corner, nearly invisible against the white walls, a cleaner worked silently along the marble floor. She was maybe 50, maybe 60, hard to tell. Life has a way of aging people who work on their knees. Her uniform was clean but worn, the kind that's been washed 100 times, faded at the seams. She pushed a metal cart loaded with supplies, spray bottles, rags, a mop handle that rattled slightly with each movement. She worked methodically. Spray.
Move, spray.
Wipe, move. Her face was blank.
Not sad, not angry, just absent.
The expression of someone who'd learned long ago that being noticed meant being in the way. People walked past her without breaking conversation. A man in a tailored suit stepped around her cart without looking down, still talking into his phone about quarterly projections. A woman in designer heels nearly bumped into her, then made an irritated sound, as if the cleaner had been the one in her way. No one said excuse me. No one said thank you. No one said anything. She was a ghost in her own body, a function, not a person. The kind of worker society needs but refuses to see. Ozzy stood 20 feet away, Sharon beside him, both dressed down in jeans and leather jackets. They'd hoped to blend in, but Ozzy's wild hair and unmistakable silhouette made that nearly impossible. Still, for the moment, no one had approached them. Sharon was reading the placard beneath a painting, something about deconstructed identity and the erasure of self. But Ozzy wasn't looking at the art. He was looking at her. The woman scrubbing a floor that was already clean, making herself smaller so the important people wouldn't have to adjust their path, and his jaw tightened. She moved methodically, head down, focused on her work. Spray the marble. Wipe in small circles, check for streaks. Move to the next section. Her movements had the rhythm of muscle memory, the kind you only get from doing the same thing, day after day, year after year, until your body does it without your brain needing to be present. Simple uniform. Navy blue polo shirt with the cleaning company's logo stitched on the pocket. Black trousers with a slight shine at the knees from kneeling too much. Comfortable shoes, the kind nurses wear, thick-soled and practical, because fashion doesn't matter when you're on your feet for 10 hours. No jewelry. No makeup. Hair pulled back in a functional bun that wasn't trying to look good, just stay out of the way. She looked like 1,000 other women you'd see on the early morning tube, the ones heading to office buildings before anyone else arrives, the ones who clean the bathrooms, empty the bins, vacuum the boardrooms, and disappear before the executives show up, the kind of person people pass without a glance, the kind whose name no one ever asks. But Ozzy couldn't look away. His chest felt tight. His breath had gone shallow without him realizing it, because something about her face felt painfully familiar. Not her specifically. He'd never met her before. Didn't know her name or her story or where she came from, but he knew that look, that exhaustion that's deeper than tired, the kind that settles into your bones and stays there. The look of someone who's been working since they were too young, and will keep working until they're too old, with nothing much to show for it except bills that never stop coming. He'd seen it on his mother's face, Lillian Osbourne, who'd worked in a factory, who'd stretched every pound until it screamed, who'd gone without so her 6 kids could eat, who'd never complained, never asked for help, just kept her head down and pushed through because that's what poor people did. You didn't have breakdowns. You didn't have options. You just kept moving. This woman had that same weight in her shoulders, that same invisible armor you build when the world's made it clear you don't matter. She paused for a moment, straightening up slowly, one hand pressed to her lower back. A brief wince crossed her face, the kind of pain you don't mention because no one's going to give you the day off for it. Then she bent back down and kept scrubbing. Around her, people sipped wine worth more than her weekly wage, discussed art they'd never hang in their own homes, checked their phones, laughed at inside jokes, and completely, utterly, totally ignored her existence. Ozzy's hands were clenched into fists. Sharon touched his arm gently. You all right? He wasn't, because he was 14 again, watching his mum scrub someone else's floors, and he'd sworn that if he ever made it out, he'd never forget where he came from. He'd never become one of them. He slowed his pace. Sharon kept walking, still absorbed in the exhibition catalog, but Ozzy's feet had stopped obeying him. His heartbeat quickened. Not the adrenaline rush of being on stage, not the chemical buzz of his wilder years. This was different. Heavier, like his body knew something his brain hadn't caught up to yet. Memories stirred, uninvited, unstoppable. Hospital corridors. Long and fluorescent lit. Smelling of bleach and desperation. Cold metal chairs that hurt your back but you sat in them anyway, because you had nowhere else to go. The smell of antiseptic that never quite covered the other smells. Sickness. Fear. Death wearing a polite mask. Waiting rooms where time moved differently. Where minutes stretched into hours and you watched cleaners mop the same floors over and over. Their presence the only constant in a place designed around crisis. He blinked hard, trying to shake it off, but the memories wouldn't leave. His mum in a hospital bed, skin paper thin, voice barely a whisper. The cleaner who'd come in during visiting hours, who'd worked around the machines and tubes, who'd smiled kindly at his mum when the nurses were too busy. The women who'd held his family together when everything was falling apart. Not doctors, not counselors, but the people nobody thanked. He stepped closer. His legs moved on autopilot. 3 steps, 5, 10. The woman didn't notice him. She was bent over her cart now, rearranging bottles, her back to him. The gallery noise faded, the murmured conversations, the clinking glasses, the pretentious laughter. All of it became background static. There was only her, and this feeling crawling up his spine that something was wrong. Or right. Or both. She turned slightly, just adjusting her position to reach a different section of floor, and time collapsed. Her profile, the curve of her cheek, the way she held her shoulders. Ozzy's breath caught in his throat. No, it couldn't be. His vision blurred at the edges. The gallery walls seemed to tilt. His heart was hammering now, actually hammering, the way it used to before he went clean, before he got sober, back when his body was trying to kill him. But this wasn't chemicals, this was recognition. Bone deep, impossible, undeniable. He knew that face, not from Birmingham, not from his childhood streets or the council estates or the factory towns, from somewhere more recent, more painful, From sitting beside hospital beds at 3 a.m. when sleep wouldn't come. From pushing through rehab when every cell in his body screamed to give up. From the worst moments of his life, when the only people who showed up were the ones nobody noticed. The woman straightened up fully now, reaching for something on the top shelf of her cart, and Ozzy saw her face completely. His mouth went dry. "Oh my God," he whispered. Sharon turned. "What?" But he couldn't answer, because he wasn't in a London art gallery anymore. He was somewhere else entirely, somewhere that had saved his life. Ozzy whispered, almost to himself, "It can't be." His voice cracked on the last word, raw, disbelieving. Sharon grabbed his arm. "Ozzy, what's wrong?" But he couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't do anything except stare. The woman looked up. Maybe she'd heard him. Maybe she'd felt the weight of his gaze. Maybe after years of being invisible, someone actually seeing you creates its own kind of gravity. Her head lifted slowly, and their eyes met. For a single, suspended second, nothing happened. She looked at him blankly, the way you look at strangers in public spaces. Polite, distant, ready to apologize for existing in their line of sight. Then her expression changed. Her eyes widened. Her lips parted slightly. The cleaning rag slipped from her fingers and hit the marble floor with a soft smack that nobody else heard. "Mr. Osbourne." Her voice was barely audible. Hesitant. Like she was afraid saying his name out loud might make him disappear. And in an instant, decades fell away. Suddenly Ozzy wasn't a rock legend standing in an upscale gallery. He was a broken man in a hospital gown, shaking so hard his teeth chattered, convinced he was dying, convinced he'd finally destroyed himself beyond repair. It was 2002, maybe 2003. The timeline was fuzzy, those years were fuzzy, blurred by painkillers and desperation, and the constant hum of machines keeping him alive. He'd been admitted for pneumonia. Or maybe it was complications from the ATV accident. Or maybe his body had just given up after decades of abuse and was shutting down one system at a time. The details didn't matter. What mattered was the hell of it, the fever dreams, the panic attacks at 4 a.m., the moments when he genuinely didn't know if he'd see morning. And through all of it, the parade of doctors with their clipboards and concerned faces, the nurses who came and went in efficient rotations, the specialists who spoke in medical jargon he couldn't follow. There was her, the woman who mopped his floor when he'd vomited in the night and was too ashamed to call for help. The woman who'd quietly cleaned around him during his worst moments, never making him feel pathetic, never treating him like a spectacle. The woman who, one particularly bad night, when he was alone and spiraling, had stopped her work, pulled up the visitor's chair, and just sat with him. Didn't say much. Didn't need to. Just sat there for 20 minutes while he cried, really cried. The kind of crying that comes from realizing you've wasted years of your life and hurt everyone you love. She'd handed him tissues. Told him in a soft voice that she'd seen people come back from worse. Told him her own son had struggled with addiction and made it through. Told him he wasn't alone. Then she'd squeezed his hand once and gone back to work. He never got her name. Never saw her again after he was discharged. But he'd never forgotten her face. And now, standing in this pristine gallery surrounded by people who'd never known real suffering, that face was staring back at him, older. To read her. But unmistakably her. Years earlier, Sharon had faced a life-threatening medical emergency, cancer. The word that changes everything. That splits your life into before and after. It was 2002, colon cancer, aggressive. Spreading faster than anyone wanted to admit out loud. The diagnosis hit like a freight train. One day you're planning tours and managing careers and living your chaotic, beautiful life. The next day you're in a hospital room signing consent forms for surgeries that might not work. Machines beeped through sleepless nights, IV drips, heart monitors, oxygen sensors clipped to fingers. Each one tracking a different system, each one a reminder that Sharon's body had turned against itself. The chemo was brutal, not the sanitized version you see in movies. The real thing, the kind that empties you out until there's nothing left. That makes you so sick you can't remember what feeling normal was like. Sharon lost her hair. Lost weight she couldn't afford to lose. Lost whole days to nausea and exhaustion so complete it felt like drowning. Fear hung heavy in the room. Ozzy tried to hide it. But she could see it in his eyes every time he looked at her. That terrible, helpless fear of watching someone you love slip away and being completely powerless to stop it. The kids tried to stay strong, but their forced smiles broke her heart worse than her own pain. And the nights were the worst. When everyone else had gone home, and it was just Sharon and the machines and the fluorescent lights that never fully turned off. When the medication wore thin and the pain came creeping back, when her mind spiraled into dark places, thinking about her children growing up without her, about Ozzy alone, about everything she'd never get to do, and one nurse never left her side. Her name was Margaret, mid-50s. Soft accent, Northern England, maybe Yorkshire. Wore her scrubs with the same matter of fact professionalism. Sharon imagined she wore everything, but there was something different about her. Calm, steady, reassuring. Not in that patronizing way some medical staff had, the ones who spoke in sing-song voices like you were a child. Margaret spoke to Sharon like an equal, like a woman who'd seen some things and knew bullshit when she heard it. She didn't make empty promises, didn't say, everything will be fine, when she didn't know if it would be. But she spoke hope when no one else could. You're strong, she'd say while checking Sharon's vitals at 3 a.m. Stronger than you think. Your body's fighting hard. I can see it in the numbers. Bad days don't mean bad outcomes. Trust me, I've seen hundreds of patients. You're a fighter. And somehow coming from her, it didn't sound like platitudes. It sounded like truth. She fought when others were exhausted, during Sharon's worst night, when her fever spiked to dangerous levels and her blood pressure dropped, and the other nurses were scrambling, calling doctors, their voices tight with controlled panic. Margaret didn't flinch. She worked with absolute focus, adjusting medications, monitoring responses, making split-second decisions that Sharon would only understand the importance of later. She stayed 3 hours past the end of her shift, refused to leave until Sharon was stable, sat beside the bed afterward, one hand resting gently on Sharon's arm, and said quietly, "You're not going anywhere, not on my watch." And she meant it. She saved Sharon's life. Not alone, there were doctors, surgeons, entire teams of specialists. But Margaret was the one who made the difference in the moments that mattered most. The one who saw Sharon as a person, not a patient. The one who cared beyond her paycheck. And when Sharon was finally discharged, when she hugged Margaret goodbye with tears streaming down both their faces, she'd promised, "If you ever need anything, you find me." Margaret had smiled. "Just stay healthy. That's all I need." Then she disappeared back into the ward, back to saving other lives, while the world forgot she existed. Back in the gallery, Ozzy's voice trembled. You were there for us." It wasn't a question. It was a statement heavy with disbelief and gratitude, and something that felt dangerously close to grief. Because how do you process this? How do you reconcile the woman who saved your wife's life with the woman scrubbing floors, while people step around her like furniture? The cleaner's eyes softened with recognition. The blankness, that carefully constructed invisibility, melted away, and underneath it was someone real. Someone who remembered. Someone who'd carried those hospital nights with her too. A small, humble smile formed, not proud, not looking for acknowledgement, just warm, human. The smile of someone seeing an old acquaintance after years apart. "Yes," she said quietly. That was a long time ago. Her voice was exactly as Ozzy remembered. Gentle but strong. The voice that had talked Sharon through the worst nights. The voice that had promised her she'd make it through. Margaret. Ozzy breathed. The name came back to him all at once, like muscle memory. She nodded. "I'm surprised you remember." Surprised. Ozzy's voice cracked. "You saved her. You saved Sharon's life." "How could I forget?" Other people in the gallery were starting to notice now. Heads turning. Whispers starting. Someone recognizing Ozzy Osbourne, having an emotional conversation with a cleaning lady. But neither of them cared. Sharon had finally realized something was happening. She'd crossed the gallery floor and was standing beside Ozzy now, her eyes moving between him and Margaret, trying to understand. "Sharon?" Ozzy said, his hand shaking as he reached for his wife. It's Margaret, from the hospital, when you had cancer. It's her." Sharon's face went white. Her hand flew to her mouth. For 3 full seconds she just stared, processing, remembering, connecting this woman in a faded uniform to the person who'd sat beside her bed at 3 a.m. and promised her she wouldn't die. "Oh my God," Sharon whispered. Then louder, "Oh my God." She moved forward, closing the distance in 2 steps, and grabbed both of Margaret's hands. "It's really you." Margaret nodded, her own eyes starting to glisten. "Mrs. Osbourne, you look wonderful." "Because of you?" Sharon said fiercely. "Because you saved my life? The doctors did their jobs." Sharon interrupted. "You did more than that. You cared. You stayed. Her voice broke. "You held my hand when I thought I was dying." Margaret squeezed Sharon's hands gently. You were never going to die. Not with that fight in you. I didn't feel much fight most days. I know. But I saw it anyway. There was a beat of loaded silence. The kind where 20 years of life lived apart suddenly collapses into a single moment. Then Ozzy spoke, his voice rough. What are you doing here? It wasn't accusatory, it was pain. Raw, confused pain working, Margaret said simply. She glanced at her cart, slightly embarrassed. Been doing private contract cleaning for about 5 years now. The pay's actually better than the hospital was, if you can believe that. Ozzy couldn't believe that, didn't want to believe that. You were a nurse, he said like she might have forgotten. A brilliant nurse. Margaret's smile turned sad. Past tense. What happened? She hesitated. Clearly didn't want to burden them with it. Decades of working-class conditioning had taught her not to complain, not to overshare, not to make your problems someone else's responsibility. But Sharon's grip tightened on her hands.
Please tell us.
Margaret took a breath. Budget cuts, she said finally. The NHS has been struggling. They've been letting staff go for years now. Last in, first out, they said. But that wasn't really true. It was whoever cost the most. And senior nurses with decades of experience. You won't believe what happened next. Should I upload part 2? Comment what you think is happening.